Hello. History records that one of the early explorers of the North Pole, while he was aiming to get to the magnetic North Pole, he stopped his journey, pulled up his huskies and got his compass out and checked where is true north and took a bearing, took a line of sight on a mountain, put it back in his pocket, got back with his huskies and off he went. And after an hour of travelling in that direction, pulled them up again, got his compass out just to check he's on the right track. When he checked where true north was, it was now over here. And he thought, that's strange. So he took again a line of sight, got a bearing. He was going and saw a mountain that he could aim at, put it back in his pocket, back with his huskies, and he went for another hour. Got off, repeated the process, checked his compass, and now true north was over here. What's happening here? He was taking his bearings all the time. It wasn't too long before he realised that while he thought he was going towards true north, the firm foundation on which he was standing, the large ice floe, was actually moving. Now, we may invest a lot of time into building our foundations and we may think we know where true north is, but the world is changing all the time. It's changing for our children and our young people. So we need to be constantly reassessing where is our true north and where are we investing our time to make sure we're heading in the right direction towards our true north. On the foundation of family, household family, and generational connections that we built in the last video, we now want to build some what we call formational pillars. Each of these pillars contribute to the other to strengthen a resilient, lifelong faith. Now, hear me say, there are no guarantees with this. Proverbs says, train up a child in the way that they should go, but that is a proverb, it's not a promise. It's a good thing, it's a wise saying. But building these pillars is a strategic investment of time into the future of your children and young people. The first of these pillars is about serving on mission. For too long, children have been seen as objects of the mission rather than active participants in the mission. Children are not simply to be seen as jugs to be filled with information, but rather as whole people of God who can actively contribute to the mission of God. When any of us is given a chance to give an account of the hope that is within us, it causes our faith to go deeper as we talk about what is true, what we know to be true. This is true for all ages. Where are the opportunities for your children and your young people to be able to give out as well as take in as they continue to grow in their journey with Jesus? And where can this be done with all ages together as part of a family? My wife and I have 3 kids, and today they continue to actively serve God today. And as they were growing up, as we grew up together, going on beach missions every year was a priority. In fact, when we decided to stop going, Mark and I, after a year or two, our children said, can we please go back to beach mission in that environment? When they were growing up, they went on camps and they took their friends from school who didn't know Jesus to go on camps with them. When they went to university, they got involved in university mission activities. As they grew older, they went on separate mission trips to Congo and to Sri Lanka. And when each of them was baptised, our family tradition, they then had a chance to explain the difference that Jesus made in their lives to their friends who'd come to hear and see them baptised. So as you add the first pillar, the first formational pillar to your house that you're building, remember the words from the Bible which says that we are all called to give an account of the hope that is within us. May your children and young people have opportunities to do that as they serve on mission. And what could this look like in your home family and in your church family? Second formational pillar is about helping our children and young people to respond with compassion. We are acutely aware of the brokenness in the world in which we live that surrounds all of us. We all have hopes, we all have fears about the future. So do our children and young people. Too often we provide our children with the adult solutions to some of the world's problems and our community's problems, rather than actually just presenting them with the issue at hand and involving them in a process of what are some suggestions of what could be done. The internet is filled with stories of children and young people today who are changing their community and the world in their own way. I'd love to take time to tell you some stories of young people I've met who are changing the world. What might be possible for your children if they were just given the opportunity? I know growing up in our family that an elderly man in our church congregation, his wife died after being married for more than 50 years. And my wife, an excellent cook, she has a gift of taking meals to people. And so she said, Terry, would you look after the children? I'm taking a meal round to Ron. And she did, and Ron loved that. Let's rewind. If only we thought a bit differently. Wouldn't it have been better if our children had joined us, if we all went, so we could sit down and our children could see and experience the smile in Ron's eyes as he reflected on 50 years of marriage to his wife and the hope that he has of being with her one day. Even rewind again and go back to our dinner table and say, what could we do together to serve Ron? So not just our adult answer of cooking a meal, involve our children in the process. I'm sure our youngest would have said, Ron served in the army. We could buy Ron a Nerf gun. Maybe Ron would enjoy firing that around the house. And if that had happened, I hoped we would have bought that Nerf gun, and I think Ron would have loved it. Let's think differently as adults, involve our children in the process so they can respond with compassion. Can I say that it could just be as simple as 1, sitting with the heart of Jesus, 2, seeing with the eyes of Jesus, and 3, serving with the hands of Jesus. Add that pillar to your building that you're building here today. And may our children grow as we give them opportunities, as it says in Romans 12 and 15, to rejoice with those who rejoice and to weep with those who weep. Here's a question for you. Talk it over with your neighbour. How many stories are there in the Bible? Easy as that. Pick a random number, make it as big as you want to. Have a go, call it out, compare your ideas. I actually met a pastor once who, when he was at Bible college, calculated how many stories in the Bible. I know the answer. Maybe you've got it right. Okay, time is up. The answer is 1. There is just one story in the Bible, and that's God's big story. Every part of the Bible, every event, every book, every character, every command, every prophecy, all must be understood in the context of one storyline. In many cases, the approach to faith formation that we've taken has been built around a series of disconnected stories from the Bible with memory verses attached. Today, all of us, including our children and young people, are looking for the big story of life, want to connect with something bigger than we are, and the Bible provides that story. As we enter this story, it's important that we discover not only the content, but also that you and I and our children and young people, we're all a part of this story, God's story. It's our privilege to help others to find their place in God's big story. It is one continuing story. Began a long time ago with creation. It will end one day with new creation. We're not there yet. It's one inclusive story because we're all part of this story which hasn't finished yet. And it's one compelling story. This is a life-transforming story. Does your language and my language communicate a heart that reflects a passion for one God, one story, one future, one hope? I work with Scripture Union. I get paid to be excited about the Bible. Let's be excited as we share this. And as you add this pillar to your building diagram here, may this story be a daily lamp to their feet and light to their path, as we read in Psalm 119, 105. Sadly, for many of our children and young people, their decision to walk away from Jesus is because they haven't really had a true encounter with him, our fourth pillar. In an entertainment-driven, visually stimulated, I'm bored generation, there's a tendency to fill our programmed lives with lots of activity and noise and busyness so as to maintain attention and hopefully communicate something of value. And so while we need to be aware of learning styles and the times and the seasons, we need to use all we can to be effective communicators. there is a danger that we fill our spaces so full with activity that there's no time to hear the voice of God. I'm sure you and many other Christians can remember a time and a place where they may have felt particularly close to Jesus. Was it an event, a particular episode in their life? These same Christians would testify how important that moment was and is as they continue in their ongoing faith journey. So how important is it for us then to create the spaces where we can help our children to encounter the living Jesus? Not just in the words from the front, but in that small, still voice of the Spirit of God who desperately wants to communicate with each of us. May God's Spirit lead us to help our children and young people to meet and to come and to love a Jesus who is real, a Jesus who wants to communicate with them, and a Jesus who transforms lives. So add your fourth pillar to your building diagram, that these encounters with Jesus. Remember Jesus' words from John 10, where he says, "My sheep, they listen to my voice, and they follow me because they know my voice." May that be true for the children and young people in our circles. So take some time now to sit and reflect on these four beginning formational pillars. Explore together the questions on your screen before returning to come back in the next video to discover four more key formational pillars in this process of rethinking discipleship. Think creatively, think laterally, think honestly, think outrageously. Go on, you can do it. Hello and welcome back. Before we look at the remaining four formational pillars, let me give you a treat. I brought along with me today, and putting on the screen in just a moment, a photograph of Jesus. I know they're rare to find, but I have one. And here's my photograph. I carry it with me all the time. I grew up in a home where my parents and family weren't followers of Jesus. They weren't attenders at church. But when I was growing up, we were sent to Sunday school, and that's where I first met Jesus. And my faith has continued to grow since then. And Miss Duncan was the person who first told me about Jesus, week by week by week. This little old lady with grey hair and glasses, and her false teeth would go up and down when she sang, but she loved Jesus. At the end of every year, she would give out some brochures for a camp, and I would go on that camp every year. Here's a photograph of my siblings at our Sunday school. Which one do you think is me? I'm not the one on the left. I'm the one in the middle. And I would go on that camp. My brother or sister didn't. And I was at that camp. I met my camp directors, Colin and Betty, and so my faith was fueled at that camp. I remember their names, the names of all the camp leaders I had. I can still sing the songs that I learnt then. I won the Memory Verse Prize 5 years in a row in my primary school years. These were formational experiences for me. I did manage to track them down a few years ago and had a lovely 2 hours with them as I recounted the importance they played in my life. That experience for me was what we call a peak experience. A peak experience is a vital complement to the regular activities within the faith community and flow of family life. The experience could be a residential camp or a day camp, a special event, a program, a concert, a night, a walk with somebody, a special time. So many things make a peak memorable experience. In these contexts, faith is deepened. There's a mixture of meeting new people who've got a real faith, and then being inspired by other people and leaders who've got a vibrant faith, people who walk alongside you, living in community together for a period of time, the wow factor from some special events that may be happening, or because it's such a big event and you're used to small context. All this shapes a peak experience. They're what we call mountaintop experiences. When you climb to the top, you remember that. They are memories that you carry with you, like my camps in primary school. I can still picture myself there. And the strength is that they are shared experiences that you share with other people. All of that helps to shape what is called a peak experience. What could that look like in your life? Add that pillar to your picture of what you are building as we remember the peak experience that Jesus created for his disciples when he took Peter, James and John with him and he led them up onto a high mountain where he was transfigured. Who can we take with us? Where can we lead them? What can we create for them so that your peak experience will become memorable and long-lasting for the children and young people in your care? Many cultures we know are rich in significant events and rituals that acknowledge the rites of passage of a young person within their community. Some of them are quite bizarre, but some of them are quite significant. All young people move through various life stages, each of which, as we know, has its own opportunities and challenges. Think about the life stages of some of our children and young people. First day at school, when you graduate from elementary school, primary school, when you start a new campus, a high school, a secondary school, when you become a teenager, your baptism, your confirmation, whatever your church tradition is, when you graduate from your schooling, when you begin at university, go off to college, when you get a driver's license. All of these are parts of the passage of life where we have opportunities to celebrate. How do we best help a young person to navigate through each of these as a household of faith, family, as a community of faith, family? How can we be more strategic and intentional and connect something of God and faith into these rituals in meaningful ways? These rituals are like anchors. They provide something they can hang on to and hold on to when life begins to become a bit rough. At the same time, they also anchor us into our culture, into who we are, where we belong, and who we belong with. Sadly, many young men and women are making up their own inappropriate rites of passage. Let me introduce you to Tammy. Tammy and Dave have two kids, Sam and Georgia. And when Sam was approaching adolescence, they wanted to create something special to celebrate Sam's entry into adolescence. Listen to Sam's story of his rite of passage for him.
We asked them to think of some people in their lives, older spiritual people, that they would like to spend some time with and to learn from. And so they did. They chose the men. Sam chose men, and for Georgia, she chose women. And so I wrote them a letter and spoke to them about would they be willing over this year to spend a morning or a day with our son, and one, for two reasons. Two, to take them to do something that you like to do, share a bit of who you are. And for two, to take some time to share about what God has taught you on your journey. And so all of them accepted gladly, which was a real blessing. And each of them made plans. Oh, it's okay, as long as it wasn't rites of passage. Each of them made plans to take Sam to whatever it was they chose. They all chose different things. I asked them to take pictures along the way, so I got to scrap that memory, and Sam has this as a memory. And so they did that over the year. I asked them at the end of the year then, could they think of one or two sentences, that's something that they saw in Sam. And I asked Sam to think about what he learned from those men. So one afternoon at the very end of the year, I invited them all over for a barbecue at our house. The women and the children stayed in the house, and the men went up on the mountain, because we live under a mountain. And I took Sam up to the mountain. I stopped at a certain path and I wrote a poem to him that actually is entitled What's Right With You. I read that poem to him and I said to him, Sam, this is what we see in you. It's what I see in you. I love you and I will always be there for you as a mum, but it's time for you to start taking some steps for yourself, and you're going to walk that track and I'm going to go now and you're going to step out, because we actually believe that you have what it takes to be the man of God that God's called you to be. So I got back in the car and he walked this track kind of looked back a couple of times and then kept on walking, and it wasn't long down before the track that one of the men jumped out and shared with him what they saw in him, and they walked together to the next man, to the next man, to the next man, until they got to the edge of the cliff where David, my husband, Sam's son, Sam's father, was waiting. David was then able to share with him in front of these men what he saw in him. He gave him a Bear Grylls knife, which was the first time that he'd been trusted with a knife that could seriously chop your arm off, as a symbol to say, we actually believe that you are responsible and you can make good choices. And we walk with you in that. They prayed together. It was filmed. They came back down. We all watched it together as families, and we celebrated with a barbecue.
Isn't that inspiring? Creative. What could you do? Don't be put off by, I could never do that. What could you do? Because that will be a great investment into the children and young people in your family, in your community. Take your building picture out again. Add the fifth pillar. I think that's the sixth pillar. And as you draw that sixth pillar about rites of passage, remember the words from 1 Corinthians 13:11, which reminds us that we all move through stages of life. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. Let's celebrate each of those stages. I remember a time in our church when our youngest son was our youth pastor, and he stood before the youth group one night and he said, all of you will grow to be like your friends. That's a true statement. Therefore, the more time that we spend with our friends, the more we will be influenced by their values and the actions that result from that. The value of positive peer community is a strong pillar that shapes and nurtures faith. It's also true in life that we can't choose our children's friends. I'm a parent, I know that. However, there are some things that parents and mentors can do to help each child and young person in the choices that they make about their friends. As children grow in age, the influence and the importance of their peer group becomes more dominant, often at the expense of parental influence. This underlines the importance of creating positive peer environments for our children. But then this is true at any age. So add the pillar of positive peer community to your diagram. Let's remember the importance that the faith of friends influences positively and negatively. What will it be for the children and young people in your care? And then the last pillar. Imagine for a moment a young child, maybe your child, sitting alone in their bedroom at night. They're reading their Bible. And they've come to the story of Samson. And he slaughtered 1,000 Philistines just with the jawbone of an ass. Or maybe your daughter's reading about Ananias and Sapphira. And they were just a little too liberal with the truth. And, well, we know what happened. Or imagine a new Christian reading the Bible, reading the story of God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son. All of us, especially children and young people in that context, need someone to talk with about these stories so as to help their understanding of God and his character in the light of what they're reading in the Bible. While some of us may have the benefit of a Christian mentor who may be able to process this, many, sadly, do not. The support of mentors and coaches is vital in any faith journey. Now, I don't want to get into defining what a mentor is and what a coach is. I just want to say simply it's somebody who walks alongside another person intentionally and pastorally, committing to do life with them for a season. In the everyday moments of life, stuff happens. Questions arise every day, small and large, about how life works and why doesn't it work. And one of the major reasons why young people choose to leave the church and the faith is because they say that their questions about life and faith just were not explored for looking for answers. Life is not meant to be journeyed alone. It's meant to be lived and journeyed and experienced in community. Close, warm relationships are vital when we're exploring strange and sometimes threatening territory, when you want to ask some of life's big questions, when you want to laugh, when you want to cry, or when you simply want to sit and wonder, but we're not meant to do this alone. I remember a stage in our church's journey where our children's pastor arranged for a mentor for every one of the primary age children in our children's program, connecting with people in big church of all ages who would connect with them on Sundays after the service, connect during the week, and simply walk with them for a period of time. One significant person in a child's life makes a difference. Well, let me multiply that, because the research clearly says that one adult makes a positive difference, but the more non-parent adults who can invest in a young person's life has even more impact. We often talk about a ratio of child protection. For every child that comes to a program, we need at least 5, other way around. For every 5 children who come to our program, we need at least 1 leader. We don't budge with that. Let's flip that around and say that for every young person, they should have at least 5 mentors, coaches, people walking alongside them. Imagine the gift that is for that young person. If we know that unanswered questions are driving young people away from the church and the faith, let's commit to walking with them. Because if we don't walk with them, somebody else will. And then if you're thinking, who could I get to be a mentor or walk alongside some of our children, my children? Well, let me give you a good place to start. Right here. The untapped resource of the grandparent generation within our communities. So as you add the last pillar to your diagram of mentoring and coaching, remember the words from Proverbs 27:17, which says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." So here we have a beginning list. I stress that. There are more formational pillars that could be added. But if we could focus at least on these 10, they will add a richness and a depth and a resilience to the faith journey of any young person, complementing the information that they're taking in through their existing programs and activities that they may be enrolled in. While our research and our understanding of human development would reinforce the value of implementing these priorities into our discipleship strategies, ultimately, it is God, through His Holy Spirit, who spiritually forms every human being. It's time to put the roof on our building diagram, and that's right in the Holy Spirit, because it is God who transforms people's lives, but He wants us to work strategically and intentionally and purposefully through these formational experiences. Let's have one final look at these 10 faith formational pillars. And a careful look will reveal that they all have something in common. And I wonder if you can see what it is. Take a moment to study the screen. It's not very hard to notice, is it? That each of these formational experiences is based on relationships. And here, ladies and gentlemen, lies our problem. What is it that all relationships require? The answer is our most precious commodity, and it is time. There is an African saying which says, "You Westerners have watches, but we Africans have time." So much of our discipling strategy takes place in time-bounded spaces. There's a brief reading after the meal, 10 minutes we can squeeze in before our favourite television show begins. Or maybe a 1-hour program as we gather as a church on Saturdays or Sundays. Or maybe a 6-week course, and so it goes on. Any rethinking approach to discipleship must involve a rethinking of our approach to relationships and the priority with which we place on our time. I've had parents who say to me, "I know this is my responsibility, but I just don't have the time." Let me say that that's not the right response. We all have the time. It's whether we have the priority, because what we determine as our priorities will determine how we invest our time. In 1875, Christopher Robert Scholes invented something called a typewriter. Look that up on Google. It's a device where you hit some keys and a metal rod comes up with the imprint of a letter on the top that goes through a black ribbon onto a piece of paper, and the imprint is there. Do them together, you can type sentences. A typewriter. When he made his first typewriter, he arranged the keys into 3 rows, and the keys were organised A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. Why wouldn't you? That's how letters were organised 100 and something years ago. People loved the typewriter, saved writing longhand. But soon people had a problem, because the faster you type on a typewriter, sometimes 2 metal rods will stick together. And so people complained that their typewriters were always sticking. So Christopher Robert Scholes thought, how can I solve this? And so he thought, obviously, the letters that are used most often are the ones that are sticking. Let's separate the vowels. Let's put the vowels over on the weak letters. The A goes over here, and the E and the I and the O over here. So the weaker letters aren't hit as hard and as often, and we separate some of the letters that come together often as well. And so he arranged the letters Q, W, E, R, T, Y, and sold new typewriters and solved the problem. People were typing slower. But eventually people kept typing faster and faster, and the same problem resulted. And then we move into electronic typewriters where golf balls would spin around no matter how fast you type, they never jammed. And so when they invented electronic typewriters, they changed all the letters on the keyboards back to A, B, C, D. Actually, they didn't. The problem was solved, but the keyboard stayed the same. I wonder if every time you look at your keyboard, you might remember that you are looking at an old solution to an old problem. As we are involved in our discipling strategies, are we still investing our time into old strategies? Or are we, under the direction of the Holy Spirit, thinking creatively and differently to come up with new strategies, new ways to get better results? This is your challenge and mine. And last of all, I began by talking about the effect of being an evangelist and seeing 25,000 people coming to know Jesus every day, a long process taking forever. When Jesus said make disciples, he actually was giving us a much easier task. Did you know that if you, this year, could help one person to come to know Jesus and to follow him and disciple them through some of these formational pillars we've been talking about, so their faith becomes real, so that next year that person then helps another person come to know Jesus. 1 becomes 2, and the second year 2 becomes 4. If that process continued, that discipling process continued, how long would it take for the whole world to come to know Jesus? The answer is about 32 years. Jesus said, as you are going, make disciples. So let's strive together for a future for our children and young people that helps them to do life well now and for the rest of their eternity.